Hi, my name is Jeff Walker, and I'm making this video to talk about my experience and my journey through navigating an eating disorder. So I don't have like a script or anything, or I haven't jotted down any notes or anything like that. I'm just kind of talking from the heart here about what this is like, and I want to give some insight and some just reflection on where I'm at with this and how it's affected me, how it's affected my family, and maybe hopefully be able to talk to somebody else, and let someone else know that, like, there's other people out here that are that deal with these diseases and these disorders. So with that being said, so my name is Jeff Walker. I'm 38 years old. I'm in the Navy. I've been in the Navy for just about 20 years now. I hit my 20-year mark actually in January of 2020. And with that, I've been married to a beautiful woman named Amanda, and I have five gorgeous little kids too. My kids are ages 9, 6, 4, 2, and about 9 or 10 months now. My youngest is. So yeah, whole busy family. I have a beautiful family. I'm very proud of them, and I'm very much still in love with my wife. My wife is the girl of my dreams. I said that the first time I saw her, and she's also a redhead, so all our kids have red hair and stuff. So most people think we have a pretty cute family. And my family is everything to me. It's my reason for existing. It's my reason for working hard. It's my reason for, I believe family is the reason that I'm put here on this earth, is to be a dad and to be a husband and to learn and grow and develop, in that capacity. So, my eating disorder first manifested about 10 years ago. And the genesis of it was sort of as a means of controlling weight via military standards that had to be made. So there's a chart effectively that the military uses, that the Department of Defense uses, that basically it's an old BMI chart that effectively, there's metrics that are out there that say if you're this tall, you have to weigh this much, and if you don't weigh this much, then you have to get what we call the rope and choke, which is a measurement of your abdominal circumference, and then if you fail that, then it goes into getting measured around the neck, and then a different part of your abdomen, and then basically they get a factor that comes out of that based again upon your height and weight, and if you do not pass that, you do not pass what's called the physical readiness test, or the physical fitness test. I think it's the physical fitness test nowadays, technically. And the implications of that, are pretty damaging as far as career implications inside of the military. It's basically the same as if, you were to go out and get in trouble with the law or something like that, go out and get a DUI. It would basically have the same impact on your career and your ability to advance or to be inside of leadership positions. So about 10 years ago, I kind of was at this point where I had made the decision that I was going to stay inside of the Navy and make it my career and use it as my means of being able to provide for my family, and what I was going to work as hard as I possibly could at. And with that, it just kind of started. I can't remember like the exact instance that it happened, but it sort of became just like a means of like controlling weight while I was on a deployment. But gradually over the years, it shifted into something far more controlling, consuming, and just nefarious, that really wound up just getting out of control. So I really wanted to talk about it, though, just in like the sense of like the stigma that's behind eating disorders, that even if like people think of it generally in society as being a female problem, that is something that only women experience, which is not true, obviously. But even then, amongst men, it's even thought of that it's a problem almost exclusively inside of like the homosexual community, the gay community. So I'm neither gay nor a woman, and it's something that has affected me greatly inside of my life. And I just wanted to put myself out there as far as for anyone suffering with an eating disorder, be it anorexia or bulimia, or anything on the spectrum of the eating disorders that exist out there, that I'm not your typical person, who you might think would wrestle with this and struggle with this. But the commonality that exists between anyone with an eating disorder is really, really strong, and that's been one of the things that I've learned over the course of being in treatment. So I don't know if I've been specific in saying it yet, but I suffer from, I'm in recovery from bulimia. It was at the point where I was engaging in eating disorder behaviors once or twice a day. I was in a position of leadership inside of the Navy. My career, had taken off through hard work, and I was kind of on the fast track for doing everything that I should do and doing the most that I could do, and being the best sailor that I could for the Navy. So I was in a position of leadership where I was serving as what's known as a chief of the boat on a submarine, which is the senior enlisted sailor. Basically like the guy that's responsible for well-being of the crew, training of the crew, serving as a liaison between the commanding officer of the submarine and the needs of the crew, being able to provide counsel and advice to the commanding officer, as well as representing what the crew is experiencing at the enlisted levels inside of the Navy. So needless to say, that was a very high stress job. It was very challenging, and I kind of came to a breaking point, if you will, that my eating disorder was just out of control. It's ironic that when people talk about eating disorders, when you first go into treatment, people say that one of the initial reasons for starting an eating disorder is control. That's almost a unanimous thing that people talk about. And it's funny though, is that the eating disorder ultimately strips you of self-control, of control of your life, of control of your emotions, of control of your thoughts, of control of your inner monologue, your dialogue, and ultimately of a lot of your values too. So it had just gotten to a point where I didn't think that I was going to be able to control it or stop it. So I had to make a really difficult choice to ask for help with my eating disorder, knowing that there would be career consequences and career implications for it. Where effectively I'm in the submarine force, and as submariners, we have pretty high standards as far as medical requirements, both in physical and mental health. And obviously, suffering with an eating disorder, being straightforward and honest about that finally with myself and with my medical team that I have inside of the Navy, that was a challenging thing to say there, because I knew that it would effectively strip me out of the job that I had, which, despite how stressful the job was, I found the job rewarding. I found the job satisfying. I liked my job. I like working with sailors. I like helping people out. I had a cool job, and I knew that getting help would result in me losing that, as well as just kind of, I use the term putting a bullet in my head as far as career stuff, where I effectively just kind of derailed my own career in a lot of ways by coming forward and asking for help with this. So this was about in September, where I actually came forward and asked for help. I came into work on a Thursday and told my commanding officer that I was going to seek help on this, that I just wasn't able to control it or maintain it myself anymore. And then that was on a Thursday afternoon, or a Thursday morning rather, and on a Monday, my captain got called up to the Commodore's office, the submarine squadron Commodore's office, and told, Master Chief Walker is going to turn over and no longer be the chief of the boat, and it was going to happen by the end of the week. So basically it was like a 8-day turnaround effectively, where I went from having a job with a lot of responsibility, a lot of authority, a lot of just a lot of pride, and just a very consuming job, though, to effectively having nothing. There's about a few week period where I took a couple weeks of leave, to spend some time with my kids, and ultimately I found a treatment facility. It was really hard to find a treatment facility that both took TRICARE, which is the military's healthcare plan, and then also that took men for residential treatment, because again, there's a societal thing that thinks that eating disorders are something that women deal with, and it's not really true. There's actually like a lot of data that says that it's probably about half and half, but unfortunately men, because of the stigma that's around it, because of the embarrassment. Eating disorders are incredibly private, personal, secretive for anyone. So I'm not trying to, exclude any woman, their experience with it. But as a man, men have a really hard time coming forward with it, and especially hard time coming forward with it. And even finding treatment is very difficult, because a lot of the times, like, treatment is effectively, like residential level care or hospital level care, and a lot of the places want to create a safe environment for people. And unfortunately, there's a lot of like comorbid trauma and stuff that goes along with some women and eating disorders. And finding a place that would actually take me for residential care was challenging. I did ultimately settle on a place in North Carolina called Veritas Collaborative. I got to Veritas on October 20th, and initially I did what's called residential care, which is 24-hour, 24/7 care, and it's effectively just like a mental hospital, with a focus obviously on eating disorders. So with the focus on eating disorders, it's a lot of stuff about controlling time that you're allowed to have access to the bathroom, food requirements. Your progress is effectively based upon being able to keep down a normative amount of food and complete it, and then make sure that your body is getting the nutrition that it needs, and then keep it down. So it's very much like a forcing function. There's a physiological side of eating disorders, and there's also like a psychological side of eating disorders. And with residential care, is like the first thing they do is just sort of force you into the physical side of it. And that's really hard, just because over years and years and years of eating disorder behaviors, my body had basically, I knew how to cheat my brain via my stomach and convince my body that I didn't need food. So actually eating like a normal amount of food was really, really difficult. So over the course of residential treatment, though, you eventually start getting passes, which is effectively like, the ability to go out, for an hour or two at a time, and then gradually those get longer and longer to where maybe you get like 6 hours at a time or something like that, and have the ability to go see a movie, or go do shopping or something like that, or go to the library, or go to a museum, anything like that. And with that, it's like you have a dietitian that's part of your team here inside of treatment, and effectively, like, if you tell your dietitian anything that you have a hard time with, like I jokingly talk, with my dietitian, wonderful girl, that no matter what it is that I tell her, she's gonna make me do it. So it's like, never ever tell your dietitian, what food you're scared of or anything like that, because otherwise they're just gonna, if I tell my dietitian that I'm terrified of the Cheesecake Factory, she's gonna go, okay, you need to do that. So how about Friday night? It's like, shit, now I gotta go to the Cheesecake Factory. Which, for anyone who has an eating disorder, the Cheesecake Factory is literally the worst place in the world. Everything from the menu, to the environment, to the portions, to the calorie count, to the fact that it's cheesecake. It's really, really a stressful experience for anyone with an eating disorder. So I jokingly said that, like, the Cheesecake Factory is like a haunted house. Like, you pull into the parking lot and you hear like thunder striking, and a wolf howls in the distance somewhere, just because it's scary like that. So did about a month of residential treatment, and over the course of that too, I had to do a lot of like just being honest with myself about like whether or not I was shifting my behaviors just to other things. I think my eating disorder got more, it got worse when I quit drinking and quit smoking about 6 years ago, almost now, where I just kind of found something that, just replaced one maladaptive behavior with another. And as I got here, even I kind of realized, just via ultimately just getting in trouble. And this was a hard thing for me to reconcile with, and an important thing for me to deal with. And I'm grateful for my wife for being part of it and helping me along with it, as challenging as that's been for her and as painful as it's been for her. So I'd been spending a lot of money on things that I didn't necessarily need, and I'd been doing it in secret via credit cards. And that was just, a lot of it was food. Most of it was food, actually. But then just other things, just stupid things that, made me feel some connection to who I felt I was at heart, hobbies that I have or something like that, or, a t-shirt that has a Star Wars thing on it or something, or a stupid Star Wars hat. I mean, that's the type of things I was just buying to have some semblance of joy. And that's really one of the things that an eating disorder saps out of your life is joy, and what that feels like, where everything just feels kind of hollow. Everything feels kind of like it's on mute. The colors, everything's dimmer than it should be. It's tough to explain. So figuring that part out, and figuring out how to control the impulsivity outside of just being exclusive to the eating disorder, and how to actually be honest with myself about, how I was coping. So there's a lot of things that going into treatment for an eating disorder, things that I didn't expect to have happen, that kind of did happen. Another thing was a semblance of grief. Your eating disorder, my eating disorder, it's like another person inside of you almost. It's the negative critic that's inside of there. Your inner monologue is always extremely challenging and obviously negative. I've heard it described in some ways as being in an abusive relationship with yourself, which is, there's a lot of parallels that exist there in the sense that when you're trying to get rid of your eating disorder, you think about all the good times that you and your eating disorder had together, and all the things that, your eating disorder helps you with. And there's a lot of things that decoupling what my eating disorder has latched onto that are good characteristics of myself, because there's a lot of things that about my eating disorder that actually make me high performing, that made me a good sailor, a good leader, a good submariner, somebody that always thought about, the worst case scenario and was always planning ahead and always worrying and always catastrophizing, always, thinking about what's coming next, and just, my anxiety that went along with that, enabled me to perform well professionally because I'm someone that cares. That's an interesting thing that I've discovered too, and just meeting other people. That's probably been the biggest thing that's coming forward and getting treatment for my eating disorder is actually meeting other people. And it's funny that the commonality that I have, the people that are here, there's people of all various ages and backgrounds, genders, sexual orientations, all that. But the one thing we all have in common, regardless of age or any other difference, is that we all care a lot. That's something I noticed in the first week of treatment. Is you can't be a moron and have an eating disorder, because you can't just be a person who's just ambivalent, to things inside of life. Somebody that just, I'm not really worried about it. Nobody with an eating disorder thinks like that, because that's just, it is not the way that the eating disorder voice works. So another thing that I kind of experienced over the course of the first couple weeks of treatment was a sense of grief of just losing my eating disorder, and the panic that went along with that, the stages of grief, all the things that go along with losing a loved one. And I use that analogy of the abusive relationship again, because the eating disorder is so ingrained inside of you that you just don't see how life could happen without it. And that's very similar to how I've so I've been told, is it like being like in an abusive relationship is like. That it's, you know, it's hard to let go of, even though you know that it's miserable and, you know, you're not better off for it. So the last couple weeks, or a few weeks rather, I've been doing partial hospitalization treatment, which is basically I go to the hospital from 8 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, and do like programming there, do like various groups and stuff. Trying to think like other things I really wanted to talk about. Values. Doing work on values was really important to me. And it was very, very crucial thing for me to figure some stuff out personally with regards to my recovery. And this is something that like they do a lot of work with anybody that's going through an eating disorder. Is basically they have you pick out, you know, like a list of like 200 words that are values that you ascribe to. And you have you narrow it down, you know, to like 10 out of like 200, where you line them all up and you figure out, you know, like what are your values. And I think for me, like my top ones were family, empathy, integrity, honesty, humor, transparency. Those are like the big ones, right? And then the question that I got asked by my therapist with that is, okay, well, you know, how do those values line up with your eating disorder? And I look at the way that like my eating disorder made me think and, you know, controlled me, and how it was just completely misaligned with my values. You know, I wasn't present to be there with my family, which is my ultimate value, my ultimate reason for being here. You know, for years now, I haven't been present, which is hard, and it hurts to think about that, of just missed opportunities or just mistakes made. And again, that's part of why recovery is so important to me. It's just because I want to be there for them, and not just be there presently or be there physically, but be there mentally as well. So yeah, values work is really important. And the values, you know, of like honesty and transparency, like I was hiding stuff from my wife and not being completely honest. Eating disorders are really good too about like, you know, saying something like you're not lying, but you're not telling the whole truth, you know? So it's like, oh, you know, did you purge last week? Well, you know, maybe I purged on Sunday, but Sunday isn't technically last week. Sunday's actually this week, you know, like that's kind of how an eating disorder operates. So I'm getting ready to be discharged here shortly, to go back home. I get to go back home and to be there for Christmas with my family, which I'm really excited for. I'm really nervous for it too, though, just because of the sense of like artificiality that's existed inside of treatment, you know. Despite the fact that like I've been kind of doing things on my own and, you know, going out on my own, eating, you know, and putting myself in like deliberately like stressful situations in order to simulate, you know, some things that maybe I'll have to do inside of like real life. So I'm nervous about going home. I'm nervous about just being back inside of, you know, the real world. I have a lot of like concerns about how I'm going to continue military service, and, you know, deal with this. It's hard for me as a chief petty officer. It's hard for me as a sailor. It's hard for me as a leader to sit there and look at something like, you know, height, weight standards and say like, I don't know if I can meet this standard. And it's funny too that like, when we think of professions that are inclined to develop eating disorders, people don't really think of the military. But if you actually look at it in the same way that you look at like other professions that place an extremely high emphasis on body image, it's really like pretty cut and dry why people in the military develop eating disorders. You know, it's the feeling of constantly being judged based upon how you look. You know, I've been that guy on the other side where you see somebody that, you know, looks to be out of standards, or, you know, doesn't look like they're towing the line as far as that standard of what they should look like inside a uniform. And it's like I have a hard time even saying the word fat without saying the word fuck after it, because that's what we call people, you know, like in the Navy. They're, oh, look at that guy, he's a fat fuck. So there's just like this tremendous negative connotation that goes along with it. And I'm terrified to be that guy, to be that person that won't be able to meet the standard. But the thing that I've ultimately reconciled inside of my head, and I've talked about with my wife extensively, is that, like, you know, eating disorders focus a lot on numbers and stuff. So I try to like reframe some numbers, and it's I could be, 20 pounds lighter than I am right now and meet the military's requirements. I don't know if I can do that healthily, though. I don't know if I can do that with a healthy relationship with exercise, with a healthy relationship with food, with a healthy relationship with stress and anxiety and depression. I just don't know if I can do that. And looking at it from numbers is that, like, if I continue to engage in eating disorder behaviors and keep putting off getting help and keep putting off, being honest with myself about it and being honest with my loved ones about it, I could, be dead by the time I'm, 50 years old or 45 or something like that. Engaging in purging behavior is incredibly damaging. I haven't had a scope down my esophagus. I'm scheduled to get one eventually when I get back home. But just like, give myself a stroke or a brain aneurysm or something, like, it's not a good way to live life. That and just like the deficiencies, the malnutrition that goes along with it. So it's like I could choose to do that and, maybe weigh, 201 pounds like I'm supposed to. Or I could, be a little bit overweight and deal with the consequences of that and deal with the uncertainty that comes along with that. And that's okay, because I'll live to be 70, 80, 90 years old. And that's really what this is all about. It's the long game. Eating disorders strip you of your ability to think about the long term, where all you think about is the present. All you think about is the next meal, the next fix, the next, the next lie, the next deceit, or next deception, rather. So looking at it from the long game, I'm here right now, been away from my family for 2 months, and I'm here right now so that way I can be there for, Thanksgiving. I missed Thanksgiving this year, which was hard, but I was in treatment so that I can be there for Thanksgiving with my grandkids eventually someday, or maybe my great-grandchildren. So yeah, that's kind of my story thus far. But I just really wanted to put it out there that, like, if you're suffering from an eating disorder, you're not alone. You deserve help. You are worthy of it. I know that a lot of times our eating disorders tell us that we're unworthy or we're undeserving of the things that we have, that we feel like a burden to those that we love. And it's hard to love someone with an eating disorder. I really understand that, and I see that, because, again, we're self-destructive and very secretive, and it's really, really hard. It's hard to sit there and tell somebody that they are loved and they are deserved, when that person's inner critic and inner dialogue is just constantly telling them, no, you're not worthy, you're not deserving. So I'm glad that I came forward and got help. It hasn't been easy, but again, it's about that long game, right? I'd rather deal with the uncertainty that comes along with throwing this wrench inside of my life and my family's life, and but at least to be there and to be there for my kids and for my wife and for my family, and ultimately for myself, to live a life that is meaningful and has joy. And I deserve that. If you're suffering from an eating disorder, you deserve that too. And yeah, I'll probably try and post some more stuff, but I just want to put out more things out there. This is my first video I'm actually ever uploading in any kind of context like this. So I know it's been about a half hour. If you're still with me, I appreciate it. Yeah, hit me up, leave a comment, whatever. If you want to talk anytime, I'm definitely somebody that has, I think, like a pretty unique optic on what it's like to have an eating disorder, and then also what it's like to be a man, what it's like to be a father, what it's like to be a husband, what what it's like to be a professional, and to reconcile that with our lives. So thanks for watching.